Hello again, everyone. Edwin Lerner back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about transit Mercury making a square opposition or inconjunct aspect to one's natal Jupiter. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Mercury, well, they can manifest in communications, assimilating information, mobility, siblings, cousins, neighbors, analysis. When transit Mercury is basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Jupiter, well, this may be expressed in communications, assimilating information, mobility, siblings, cousins, neighbors, analysis. It might conflict with expanding horizons. It might be a situation where you may have siblings, cousins, neighbors, even people from your early education. Their needs may be taking precedence over you trying to go outside the box, so to speak, and expand your horizons. This can be a time too when looking at this. Keep in mind that transit does not last very long. It lasts longer, of course, than the transits of the moon. Transits of the moon only are about 10 hours on average, but when you look at transit Mercury, you're talking still it's in days, so it can have certain significance, but they're generally it's not going to be long lasting in its duration. Um, the thing about this transit too is that you're going to, you can have like your communications at this time. Maybe there's some negative communications that might be conflicting with your enthusiasm, or maybe you're not overly enthusiastic or exuberant about trying to process information at this time, taking in information, assimilating it, or even matters with short journeys. Short journeys, you may simply lack the exuberance and enthusiasm to actually do at this point in time. Now, another thing too is that it could be information you receive at this time may conflict with some kind of optimism or hope, or some kind of, Capricorn might be some kind of depressing news or some matters related to your career or ambitions. Maybe, or in some cases too, I would say the mind may actually be over optimistic about things. So it's careful. It's very important at this time, people, to be careful not to over, make something bigger, than it actually is, or think that the chances or prospects of something happening in a positive manner with whatever it may be will actually pan out that way. Because a lot of times, I would say with this transit, you're not seeing everything, you're just, you're being very, you might be overly optimistic and exuberant, not looking at the potential negative aspects in whatever it is you're doing. If Taurus is involved, for example, or enter the second house, it could be over financial or monetary matter. Now, the thing about this too is that this transit can also, you're talking about Mercury again, is connected with siblings, cousins, and neighbors. These people may conflict, with you going to, if you're trying to go to another country, traveling abroad. These are the foreign travel. It can be a situation where their needs, again, might be taking priority over that. It might be if you're trying to get information about that, something like this time traveling abroad, going to a foreign country, maybe there might be some delay in it, or it might be news that you really don't want to hear pertaining to it. And it could also be too, you're talking about, Jupiter's connected with the truth and veracity. So it might be a time too where maybe the truth might actually hurt a little more than it ordinarily is, but it could be a situation too, maybe it's a little bit harder to actually communicate and convey the truth at this time more so than usual, or it might be a tendency to distort or exaggerate in communications at this time. Jupiter is also associated with the law. So the thing about this is, be careful at this time that you're not, that your mind, may be averse to the law, because remember that you're talking about basically an adverse aspect between Mercury and Jupiter. And Mercury can be connected with the mind, its thinking. Jupiter is associated with the law. Now, anatomically speaking, Jupiter is associated with the sciatic nerve. It could be obesity, the hips. Um, this is something where, when you look at this, it might be harder to articulate matters with this if you are experiencing any problems with one or more of these issues at this time. It can be a situation where maybe, I don't know, I know Mercury's connected with mobility. I don't know if walking, taking short journeys through walking, could, maybe exacerbate a situation with the sciatic nerve or hips. That's not something I know 100%, but if it can, then the propensity for that may increase during this transit. Um, Jupiter is also connected with higher education. So it might be a time if you're trying to apply for some college. I mean, Mercury is connected with writing, and you're typing, or you're on the computer, you're trying to put in an application for a college, as an example. Those things, might take a little bit longer at this time, because you're talking about basically a conflict between Mercury and Jupiter at this time. Or if you're trying to write something to get published, maybe it doesn't go according to plan. There may be a delay. Maybe you're overly enthusiastic about it, and not looking at the possible negatives that could be connected with it, or that you might be thinking, well, there's no way this won't get published, and you may find out later that it's been rejected, whatever you attempted to do in order to get published. Jupiter is also associated with philosophy, so it can be a time where maybe it's harder for you to articulate your philosophies, your beliefs, your opinions on something at this time, more so than usual. It might be a time where maybe your philosophical outlook is not, is conflicting with siblings, cousins, neighbors, people that were prominent in your early education. Could have been a classmate, as an example. I mean, it could be, say, if it's your natal Jupiter is in Aquarius, as an example, it could be rather unorthodox or unusual philosophy, or even religion, because Jupiter is associated with religion as well. Now, another way that this transit may manifest, in some cases, it could be that siblings, cousins, neighbors may conflict with you, um, trying to expand your horizons. Maybe, as I reiterate from what I said before, your philosophy maybe. Again, if it's in Aquarius, as an example, it could be a very unorthodox belief. It could be maybe some belief in astrology, or maybe you're trying to expand horizons with astrology or astronomy, or even innovation. And there might be some matters pertaining to siblings, cousins, neighbors, even people that were prominent in your early education, or someone you know well in your short journeys. Um, it can be a situation to me, local transportation issues may be due to the outdoors, maybe because Mercury is connected with local transportation. Jupiter is associated with the outdoors, sports, a religious event perhaps. Also, too, news that you might receive may adversely affect your exuberance and enthusiasm, which is Jupiter. Now, if transit Mercury is in Capricorn, as an example, it can be really, in some cases, it might be depressing news. It might be over maybe some matter pertaining to career or responsibility or limitation. The thing about this, too, in some cases, it could be a communication with publishers, religious people, might be people that are prominent in a religious congregation you may belong to, people in the law. They might be difficult or to contact, or maybe the communications may be more difficult, or they might be harder to contact these people at this point in time. Say if your natal Jupiter is in Gemini, as an example, it could be a publishing. Maybe you're trying to publish short stories or something that's like cartoon type art. Now, hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, now this time too, another way this transit may manifest is that thinking may be overly optimistic at this time. Issues with the hands, the arms, nerves, breathing, they may be distorted. Uh, they might maybe conflict, with what if you're trying to travel abroad or go to a foreign country, as an example. Those are, or something with higher education. If you're in college and you have to write something out by chance by hand, um, or even typing. There's some issues with the hands or something that might be conflicting with that. There might be a greater propensity for that at this time, more so than usual. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Margaret said, stay well.